but I am willing to say in the meantime, there's basically no chance he's going to go third. He maybe goes top 10 still, maybe goes 8 to Carolina. I don't know. He's not going ahead of Justin Fields or Trey Lance.
On this video, we'll give you 5 bold predictions for the NFL draft. I'm Alan Seslowsky here with RotoWire senior writer Mario Puig. Mario, in your article that's linked in the video description below, you talk about bold predictions. The first one that caught my eye was you said Mac Jones is more likely to fall out of the first round than go in the top 5 picks.
I think there are some concerns with Mac Jones, especially off the field, related to his DUI issue and sort of which plays into how he doesn't have a very good build for a football player, for a guy who is forced to practice football. You could conclude that maybe he has a little beard now and then, even aside from the DUI incident. And you could recall Johnny Manziel, in hindsight, was correctly punished, was correctly criticized as a prospect and fell in the draft because of his sort of off-field shenanigans. And you hear no acknowledgement, no need to clear this up when you hear these narratives about Mac Jones's hype, which to me makes it sound like there's somebody going around to these media people and telling them like, oh, Mac Jones is going really high. You better tell everyone about how Mac Jones is going to go real high. And if I were a team who had no interest in Mac Jones, that's what I would go tell Pete Strager. I'd go tell anybody willing to publish what I tell them, anything that is not true and nothing that is true. So it just is me kind of thinking the smell test doesn't really pass here. Like Mac Jones, if they had said, he's getting a little more hype, he might go in the top 20, he might go in the top 10, someone might trade up for him. That would be a more measured sort of hype narrative. And especially if people were saying, that DUI, it's not good, but here's how he got his life in order after that. And here are all these changes to his personality and his work ethic that have happened since then. And look at all these great dividends it's yielded for him. There's no need to justify any of that in these narratives that come out, which means like they're basically skipping it, I think. And NFL teams wouldn't skip that. They held Manziel to a higher standard than we're being told to believe with Mac Jones. So anything could happen, but I am willing to say in the meantime, there's basically no chance he's going to go third. He maybe goes top 10 still, maybe goes 8 to Carolina. I don't know. He's not going ahead of Justin Fields or Trey Lance.
Your second bold prediction was that Devonta Smith is set to be an outlier to succeed, recently weighing in at about 166 pounds. What is your take on that?
Well, I think the concerns with Smith's frame are definitely valid. Like he's not just skinny; he's about as skinny as anyone we've ever seen. And I think with that fact comes both concern and acknowledgement that we don't really know what's going to happen. As much as people say it's unprecedented for a player like Smith to succeed, it's also unprecedented for a player like Smith to fail because he's just never been a type before. It's true to say that someone like maybe JJ Nelson was too skinny to be good, and JJ Nelson was like 155 or something like that. But JJ Nelson played at UAB, and JJ Nelson did not put up the numbers that Devonta Smith did at Alabama, and neither did anyone else really. I think that as much as people point toward recent comparisons of skinny, disappointing receivers like Dede Westbrook, Paul Richardson, two guys who dominated in college, neither of them dominated to the extent that Devonta Smith did. And I think if you're going to reach for cases like that as proof that he can't succeed, it makes just as much sense to look toward someone like not just Marvin Harrison from the late 90s and then the 2000s, but in the earlier 90s, Isaac Bruce. Apparently, according to NFLCombineResults.com, Isaac Bruce was 6 foot 173 at his 1994 combine. So that's a little bit different than 6 foot 166, but it's not that much. And we see from these weigh-ins at pro days to when players disclose their weight at a later point or a prior point, these weigh-ins that we're talking about are not the numbers they definitely play at. It's like maybe Isaac Bruce added some weight. I don't know. But these guys like Zaven Collins, a linebacker for Tulsa, is already 11 pounds higher than he was at his pro day. Zach Wilson was 4 or 5 pounds lighter after his pro day. We don't really know how many of these height weights are real. And I think that when you're talking about production on Devonta Smith's scale, you have to concede that as much as he doesn't have an obvious predecessor that you can point toward that definitely proves he's viable in the NFL, there's also no one you can point at that definitely proves he'll fail. No one has gone into the NFL with Smith's particular combination of characteristics.
The third bold prediction that you wrote about in your article, Kylan Hill will be roughly as good as Javonte Williams, but neither is better than Zach Moss. This one shocked me.
Well, I just think all three are good players, and it's funny to me that if you say that, it basically offends the greatest collection of people who are in the online dynasty draft community. They cannot conceive the possibility that these are three merely good players. And Zach Moss coming off a slightly disappointing rookie year in some ways, which I would just say has everything to do with injury and nothing else. Like it's already created this sort of goldfish brained verdict that like, oh, Zach Moss sucks. Anyone who compares to him is it's an insult. They're not any good. And it's like, no, Zach Moss is a good player, and Javonte Williams is a good player, and Kylan Hill is a good player. None of them warrants star level hype, in my opinion, or at least if Zach Moss Zach Moss ran a 4.65 at 223 or something. Javonte Williams ran a 4.57, 4.58 at 212. Kylan Hill at 214 ran a 4.57. If there was some sort of tools distinction between Williams and those other two guys, I would see the basis for elevating him so much higher than them. But as it stands, they are objectively a very similar caliber of athlete in all three cases. Their production was similar in all three cases. All three guys are players who have three down ability despite their lack of top end speed, and they mostly get by on breaking tackles. So I just mean to say they are all of a similar category. They are not in that Nick Chubb tier, because if they were, they'd have to be about 15 pounds heavier and about a tenth of a second faster in the 40. None of that is the case. They are just good as they are. They don't need to be more than that. And so it comes across like I'm bashing Javonte Williams, but it's more to kind of just say we need to have fair expectations for him. All the objective indicators make him more like Kylan Hill, more like Zach Moss, and less like a Nick Chubb type.
Your next bold prediction talks about Nico Collins and Tamorrion Terry. You said that they will prove to be better big wideout prospects than Michael Pittman and Denzel Mims.
Yeah, so I actually think Pittman and Mims are fine. This is not meant to bash them either. It's just I think Collins and Terry are pretty underrated, really. And the basis of that reasoning is a little bit different from Collins to Terry, because both of them have kind of weird profiles as prospects, and I think Terry's especially is not so clean. Like he has below baseline catch rates at Florida State, which is to say he caught fewer of a lower percentage of his targets than his teammates in the Florida State offense. But the way I view a player's production and the true meaning of their contribution to a team's offense has to do with how much they return overall, not just like one category. And Tamorrion Terry caught fewer passes than some of his teammates, but he also did so much more damage per target in terms of yardage and touchdowns that I think it clearly overrules it. And it speaks to it, particularly this one sort of trump card in his game, which is his downfield ability. Like I think Tamorrion Terry is so good as a downfield threat, so uniquely good at it, I should say, that it opens up parts of his game where he might otherwise be weak or otherwise not good enough. And so it's one thing to be a guy with bad hands. Like let's just say Tamorrion Terry has bad hands. You can still get away with it, I think, just as Will Fuller has shown, if you can make enough of an impact in other areas of the game. And I think Terry is a downfield threat specifically who opens things up in that similar sort of way. Nico Collins has cleaner production. Like his catch rate is way above the Michigan baseline. His yardage is way above the Michigan baseline. The concern with him is he didn't he didn't draw a high share of the targets in the Michigan offense. He only drew about 16.6% of the targets in his last 2 years at Michigan. But I think anyone who watched Shea Patterson play quarterback could see, oh, this guy's not very good at throwing downfield. And so Nico was mostly the downfield guy in the Michigan offense. And I think if they had a better quarterback, he could have drawn a higher share. But as it were, Patterson had to check down more to Ronnie Bell, a little bit to Donovan Peoples-Jones. And Peoples-Jones had that good rookie year for the Browns last year, and yet Nico was definitely the better player in that offense. So if Donovan Peoples-Jones might have gone in hindsight in like the fourth round or even the third after the promising rookie year he had, then I think we can imagine Collins as a third or second round sort of receiver, especially since he tested so well athletically. So I just think that Collins has cleaner production than Pittman and Mims, and I think his athleticism is close to Mims, definitely way better than Pittman. And then in the case of Terry, that's where more of the hot take is, I guess, because Terry's definitely got some rough parts of his game. But I just think that his one downfield, his one clinching ability is the downfield threat that he poses. And I think it's going to earn him snaps, and I think it's going to make it so that his deficiencies basically don't matter as much as they would if he were another player.
To get the rest of Mario's bold predictions for the 2021 draft, click the link to his article in the video description below. Try RotoWire today, free for 10 days. Get our premium tools, rankings, analysis, and breaking news alerts. No credit card required. Go to rotowire.com/try.